Hey, what up? Welcome back to another quick Flutter tutorial. In this one, I'm going to show you how to code up a minimal habit tracker. So you can check off your habits every day, and the more you complete, the greener the heat map will be for that day. And if you do this over time, you'll get this nice heat map as a monthly overview. I'll also show you how to code it up in light mode as well as dark mode. Now just before we start coding this up, let's have a look at a quick diagram just to see what we're doing. So from our app, the main functionalities that we want to do is to create a new habit, as well as editing it and deleting the habit. So we're going to do this in our habit database, which is where we're going to store these habits. So let's say, for example, we have habit 1, 2, and 3. Each of these habits should have a name, and also we're going to store a list for the completed days for that given habit. And then we're going to look at this data and then summarize it into a nice heat map and give it back to our app. So I've opened up a brand new Flutter project, and just to keep everyone on the same page, in my main function, I'm running my app, which brings us to this home page, which I've got it in a folder called pages just to keep our code nice and organized. And this is just returning a blank scaffold. So you should just have a blank white app like this. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to just create a folder here quickly called theme. And let's just set up the light mode and dark mode colors first. So you can fine tune these numbers to your liking, but you can also just copy the numbers that I've got here. So I like to specify the background, primary, secondary, tertiary, and also inverse primary. And so these are just different shades of gray that I've selected. Let's also have another one for dark mode, which is going to be very similar to light mode, but just everything is going to be a bit darker. Cool, and then just to switch between the two modes, we need to create a theme provider. And so let's say initially it's going to be light mode. And then let's have a getter to get the current theme. And a boolean for if this is the dark mode or not is going to be helpful. So it'll just do this quick check. Is the current theme data equal to dark mode? This is going to return true or false. So this should be helpful for us later on. And then let's have a method to set the theme. And finally, just a quick toggle method just to switch between the two. So if the current theme is light mode, then let's make it dark mode and vice versa. Cool, so let's come back to our main.dart file, and in our main function, we want to use a change notifier provider, which, whoops, I forgot to import. So let's open up the terminal and let's add in this package, Flutter pub add provider, just for some simple state management. So we can say change notifier provider and then give it our theme provider and then just give it our app. Cool, so if you come back to our material app down here, in the theme, we can specify, like, for example, light mode, or we can say dark mode. So we want to switch between these two modes. So let's just give it by using the provider, we're just going to give it the current theme data, which should initially be light mode, as you can see here. Cool, so if we come to our home page, which is what the app is showing right now, let's have a app bar and also a drawer here. You should be able to see, if you just save it, the little menu icon on the top left, and you can click this to open up your menu drawer. And so I'm just going to give it our background color, and in the middle, let's just have a switch so that we can go from dark mode to light mode. And I'm going to use a Cupertino switch which is the Apple style looking one, because I just think it looks pretty cool. So for this switch's value, we can give it through our provider, just if this is dark mode or not. And so this could be true or false. And so just depending on if we're in dark mode or not. And then if we tap on this switch, then we're going to go to this onChanged and then go to our toggle theme method. And if I just try this, then sweet, you can see we can toggle between dark mode and light mode. Sweet, now for our habit database, I'm going to use the Isar database to store our information. Now I've already made a separate tutorial on how to use Isar, so check that out if you need, but I can show you real quick how to use it. So firstly, let's just add these dependencies in. And we're going to create a new folder called models. And so let's create our habit. So if we think about a particular habit, let's have an ID and the habit name, and also a list of the completed days. So for the habit ID, we can just say isar.autoincrement, and it will just go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 as we create new habits. And then we're going to have a name. Let's give it a late tag because we're going to initialize it later on. And then also a list of the completed days. So in this list, the type is going to be a date time. And so just as an example, this datetime object is going to look something like this. So the year, the month, the day. So like 2024, first for January, and the day is 1. So for example, this is going to be the type of information stored in this data. Cool, so let's add a collection tag. And we also have to write this little line. So part and then habit.g.dart. So it's the same file name as this current one. So habit.dart, but we just need to put the G in the middle for generate. So we just need to run this little command, which we'll do in just a second. I want to create one more model just for some app settings, because I just want to store the first time that this app is launched, because we need to know the start date for the heat map later on. Same thing for this, we need to put the generated file and then run this command. And then it's going to automatically generate these two files here. And if you look, it says do not modify by hand. So don't touch this file. This is just so that we can save different objects like a habit in our database easily. Cool, now finally let's create our folder called database, and we're going to create our habit database here. And in here we're going to have most of our functionality. So I'm going to break it up into two sections. So firstly, let's grab our Isar object, which is our database. And the first section is just going to be a bit of setting up. So a method to initialize the database, and also to save the first time that the app starts up, and also just a getter to get the first start update. And then the main chunk of this is going to be the CRUD operations. So with a given list of habits, we can add a new habit. We can read the habits from our database, and then we can update the habits. We can do two different types of updating for a habit. We can change the on and off, and also the name for the habit as well. And then finally, we can delete a given habit. Sweet, so let's just start creating this up. So starting with the initializing. This is just some setting up for the database. So first thing we have to do is to get the directory. And that's from importing the path provider at the top. So make sure you got that. And then we can say Isar is await, and then Isar.open. And then we can give it our two schemas, which was those two classes that we created. So the habit and the app settings schema. Cool, and then just give it the directory and we can initialize through this method. Sweet, and for the sake of the heat map later on, we just want to have a quick method here just to save what the first date is when this app gets launched for the first time. If the existing settings equals null, which means it doesn't exist, then let's specify the first launch date to be datetime.now. So the first time launched is now. And then put this information into the app settings. Cool, so now that that's stored, let's have another method just to access this information, right? So we're going to go to the Isar's app settings and we're just going to return the settings first launch date. Cool, now that was just some of the setting up part. So let's come to our main.dart file and actually initialize all of this. So firstly, we have to say widgets flutter binding ensure initialized. And then let's initialize the databases. So this should be an asynchronous function so that we can await the habit database. And you can see initialize. And let's also do the saving the first launch date as well. Sweet, so now let's move on to the main functionality of this app, which is this CRUD operations. So starting with the list of habits, I'm just going to call it current habits. Let's create a method to add a new habit. So all we need in terms of the parameter is I just need to know a habit name. And so then we can create a new habit. We can save to the database and then we can reread this from the database. So let's start off by creating a new habit and just setting the name to be this new habit name. Let's save it to the database. And then once that's done, we want to just read this again from the database so that we have the latest information. So this read habits we are going to create right now. So firstly, let's fetch all the habits from the database. And let's give this to our kind of local current habits list. And then we need to update the UI. Cool, now for updating, we have two different kinds of updating. The first one is checking the habit on and off. So the updating the habit completion. And for this, all we need to know is the ID of the habit. So I need to know which habit we're looking at, right? And also the boolean of it if it's completed or not. Firstly, let's use the ID to find the specific habit. And then let's update the completion status. So if the habit is completed, we're going to add the current date to the completed days list. And otherwise, if the habit is not completed, then we're going to remove that current date from the list. Sweet, and then let's save the updated habits back to the database and then just reread everything. Cool, and the other kind of updating is just to update the habit name if we need to. So for this one as well, we just need to know the ID and then what's the new name. So let's find the specific habit first that we're looking at, and then let's update the habit name and then reread from the database. And lastly, the last functionality is to delete a habit. So for this one, I just need to know just the ID, so which habit we're deleting. And then let's reread. Cool, and that's pretty much all the code for the functionality for the habit tracker. So if I come back to my main.dart file, we have this theme provider, but I want to have another one for my habit database. So in that case, we actually can provide multiple providers. So the first one, I'm just going to give the habit database, and then the second one, the theme. Sweet, now if I come back to my home page, let's start decorating up the UI and creating our habit tracker. So starting with our drawer, which is what we have mainly here, I want to keep my code as clean as possible. So I'm going to put this in a new folder called components. And let's just import everything again. And then if I come back to my home page, then now I can just say my drawer. And it makes the code here look much cleaner. Sweet, so the first thing I want is a floating action button so that we can create this new habit. So let's just give it our appropriate colors. And I'm going to give it a plus icon, which is this add icon. If I press on this floating action button, then we want to create a new habit. So let's create that method up here. And so all of the methods that we're creating here is all for the UI related stuff. So for example, like showing a dialog box. So when I create a new habit, we're going to open up this alert dialog box, and we're going to have a text field so that the user can type something in, which means we're going to need a text controller to access whatever the user typed in. So I'm just going to restart this, and if I click on this plus button, you can see it opens up this little box and you can start typing something in. So in the decoration, I want to have a hint text just to clue the user into what they should type in here. I'm going to say create a new habit. And then in the actions, let's have a couple buttons. So I need a save button and a cancel button. So for the save button, let's get the new habit name from just the text controller, so whatever the user typed in. And then we're going to save the information to the database. So if you go to our habit database, you can see there's our add habit method that we created. And then some UI stuff, we just want to pop the box. So we just want to close it and also just clear the text controller. And so this one is going to be called save. And the cancel button is going to be similar, but we're just going to pop the box and clear the controller. Okay, so let's try this. So if I click on the plus, you can type a new habit and then save it. And I think it got saved, but we now need to display it on the screen. So let's go to our init state. So in the initial state, let's read the existing habits on app startup. So if you go to the habit database, let's read the habits. And then in our UI, in the scaffold, in the body, let's build a habit list. So firstly, let's get access to our habit database and get the current habits. And then let's return this list for the habit UI. Cool, so for the item count, that's just current habits.length. And we're going to go through each habit. So let's get individual habit. And let's check if this habit is completed today, which it would be nice if we had a sort of helper method just to do this little task for us. So in that case, I actually am going to create a new folder called util. And let's have some habit utilities. So sometimes I just want to create some kind of little methods just to help us out with the code. And so this one, what I want is given a habit list of completion days, is the habit completed today? So remember, for each habit, we are storing the days that we've completed in a list for that habit. And so I just want to know if one of those days is today. So this is going to be called is habit completed today, given a list of completed days. So we're just going to look at today and then compare the year, month, day, and return if today is in one of those days. So we can come back to our home page and we can import this little method. And then finally, we can return a habit tile UI. So for now, I'm just going to give it the habit name. And this should have a bracket. Cool, now if I just save this, you can see there's gym. So that was the first one that we saved earlier. And we can add another one. Cool, now even this is getting a bit verbose, so I'm going to come back to my components and let's create a new file for the habit tile. So let's start off with a container and we're going to decorate it. And just depending on if it's completed or not. Let's say if it's completed, the color can be green, and otherwise it can just be like a gray color. Sweet, there it is. Now I think we could use some padding and some margins. and the corners are so sharp, so let's curve them. And for the child here, let's actually return a list tile. And so we can give it the text, and also for the leading icon, I want to have a checkbox. So this checkbox is for the on and off, and so just give it the is completed boolean. And we can fill out this method for the on changed. So it's requiring this function, so I'm just going to require that at the top. And let's come back to our UI, and you can see on changed, we want to check the habit on and off. So let's create that real quick at the top. So with a given boolean, and a habit, check this off. So let's update the habit completion status. And now let's save this and test this out. And you can see if I click on these checkboxes, we can turn it on and off. Sweet. Now one thing, I just want to make this look a little nicer. If I come back to my checkbox, let's also make the active color green. Yeah, I think that looks better. And one thing is, it's actually only tappable in that checkbox region when I actually want the whole tile to be tappable. So this entire container, let's put it in a gesture detector and fill out the on tap. So I just want to toggle the completion status in the same way. And so let's try this. Yay, we can click on the tile itself. Sweet, now I want to be able to delete and also edit these habits. Import this package called Flutter Slidable. And I've used this in other apps before, but you can just wrap this in a slidable widget. And I want the slide to happen on the end of the tile. So on the end action pane, we can fill out just some kind of motion, and we can have a couple of options. So I want to have one for the edit and the delete. So I'm going to require both of these methods. And so for the edit, I'm going to give it like a gray color with a settings icon. And similar for the delete, but let's make it red and a delete icon. Awesome, now let's come back to our home page and let's just create the boxes for these. So when we want to edit or delete, we want to just bring up a quick dialog box. So just starting with the edit habit box, let's firstly set the controller's text to be the habit's current name. So we want to sort of pre-fill the text controller with the habit name. And then let's show a dialog box with a text field again. And we're going to have a couple buttons as well, so save and cancel. So this is actually similar to what we had before. So I'm just going to grab this and paste it here, and let's just fix some of this up. So just this method, so instead of adding a new habit, we're going to update the name. And so in our habit tile, if we click on the edit habit, then we can open this edit habit box. And let's do something similar for the delete. And so for the delete, it's a little bit simpler. We don't need to know anything except for just the habit ID. Okay, everything should be done. So let's just save that, and you should be able to slide from the end of this tile and access each of those methods. Sweet, and you can see I can edit and also delete. Now, one thing is some of this padding stuff, let's fix up. So this margin I'm going to get rid of around the tile and just put it on the padding on the entire widget. Yeah, there we go. And I also feel like the text could be white when it's active. Sweet, that's looking much better. So let's just go through and clean up some of this UI. So for example, like the app bar, I like to just make the elevation 0 and also just make the color transparent and instead make the foreground more visible. So now that we can input the data for our habits, let's lastly have a way to display this in a nice way. So we're going to use a heat map. So in your components, let's create a new file called heat map. And I'm going to add this package in. So Flutter pub add Flutter heat map calendar. So I've also made a separate tutorial for covering just the heat map specifically, so check that out if you need. But I can show you how to implement into this habit tracker now. We're going to return, if you start typing heat map, you can see there's our package, and we have to firstly specify the color sets. And so what this means is it's just going to be a map of colors. So like let's say the first one is green, and then all of them are different shades of green. So let's make it more green as the number gets higher. And then we need to know the start date. So we're going to display like a list of days. So we need to know when is it going to begin. So that's why we collected that information before. So let's just require that as a variable. And the end date is just going to be today. And the other important thing is the data set. So you can see here, it requires a map for a datetime and an integer for the strength. So we're going to require that as well when we create this heat map. And just some of the other setting up. So the color mode, I want the colors. Let's make the default color secondary. We can control the text color. And so all of this stuff you can customize to your own liking. And I also want to make the scrollable and size 30. Let's see what that looks like. So if I come back to my homepage scaffold in the body, currently I'm just displaying the habit list. So now let's put that in another list view, and we're going to have heat map on the top and then habit list on the bottom. So let's build this heat map. So firstly, let's get access to our database. And the current habits. And we're going to return the heat map UI. So the feature we're listening for is to know what the first date is. And so once we know what the first date is, then we can return this heat map. And so for the start date, we can just give it the information. And for the data sets, for this one as well, I kind of want another helper method just to prepare the data for us nicely. So let's come back to that habit util folder. And I just want to prepare the heat map data set. So given a list of habits, I just wanted to convert it to like a nice map. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through using a for loop. Let's go through each habit, and in each habit, let's go through each date in the completed days. And so what we're going to do is if the date already exists in the data set, then we can just increment its count. So this would result in a stronger green. And otherwise, just initialize it with a count of 1. And just return this data set. So if I come back to my heat map, we can say prep heat map dataset and just give it the current habits. And I think that's good to go. Now, a couple other things, when you have a list inside another list, for the bottom one, which is this habit list, I'm just going to specify a couple of these properties. The shrink wrap should be true and the physics should be never scrollable. So if you have lists inside of another list, like nested lists, you might have problems with scrolling. So that's why you have to say this. Cool. Now, if I save this and I rerun it, you can see there's our heat map. So it's just going to add on every single day. So currently, if I check this off, you can see one of the tiles, the latest one, is going to be a bit green. And the more I check off, the more greener it's going to get. Right? So that's what these colors are doing. So you can change these colors, obviously. And so if I have another habit, it's going to get even greener. So over time, you're going to have a nice heat map that shows you how you've been doing your habits. And let's just see what this looks like in terms of dark mode. It's looking pretty good, but again, if you want to specify and change up some of these colors, like I feel like the secondary color could be a bit darker for the tiles. Yeah, that looks much better now. So you can change it up to your style. But we coded up the habit tracker. So that's it for this video. Let me know and comment below if you have any questions or any problems. I can come around and help you out. But I hope you learned something. You can download the code below. Let me know what other apps you want me to build, because this is just so fun. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.